The media fixates on kinetic events. Russia's Oreshnik hypersonic missile, the U.S. Missile Defense Agency's SHIELD contract. This is a calculated distraction. The financial and strategic cost of a hypersonic arsenal is a liability for a state facing a solvency crisis. The true blueprint for conflict is no longer about symmetric firepower. It's about a cheaper, silent vector. The primary asymmetric threat is not a launch, it is silence. 97% of global data and financial transactions, trillions of dollars per day, travel through a handful of undersea fiber optic cables. According to RUSI analysis, these cables are undefended liabilities. For a state facing collapse, like Iran, as noted by The Atlantic, or a geopolitically cornered Venezuela, severing these nodes is not an act of war. It's a mathematical equation to induce a systemic market crash in an adversary at a fraction of the cost of conventional escalation. This protocol extends from the seafloor to low Earth orbit. A nation's power is now a function of its data throughput. CSIS reports detail the growing threat of satellite blinding, using ground-based lasers or co-orbital systems to disable the GPS and communication relays that form the central nervous system of a modern military and economy. The objective is not destruction, but induced paralysis. This creates the blind Leviathan, a superpower armed with unmatched kinetic force, but stripped of its sensory input. Its carrier groups are deaf, its financial markets are frozen, its logistics chain is severed. This is the endgame for a weakening state, not to fight the Leviathan, but to cut its optic nerves and trigger a cascade of systemic failure. The launch on warning protocol of the 21st century isn't nuclear, it's a zero-sum economic blackout. The official narrative frames the Ukraine conflict as a war of expansion. This is a strategic misdirection. The primary vector is not territorial ambition, but a severe domestic solvency crisis within the Russian Federation. The kinetic operation is a desperate economic maneuver to forestall internal collapse. According to RUSI and CSIS analysis, the staggering kinetic cost of the war transformed the campaign into an existential domestic liability. Sustaining a high-intensity conflict with conventional forces drains state liquidity and erodes the political capital required for regime stability. When the balance sheet shows a terminal decline in conventional solvency, the state is mathematically forced to recalculate its risk profile. This is the pivot to asymmetry. The cost of conventional defeat becomes greater than the perceived risk of deploying a low-cost, high-impact strategic asset. The deployment of the Oreshnik hypersonic missile, as reported by Al Jazeera, is not a signal of escalating strength. It is a data point proving profound conventional weakness. This protocol, solvency through asymmetry, is the core blueprint. A state facing economic and political zero-sum will not collapse quietly. It will liquidate its most dangerous, non-linear assets to disrupt the system that threatens it. The Oreshnik is not the final move. It is the opening entry in a playbook written for the insolvent. The core blueprint for modern conflict is not ideological. It is mathematical. According to the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, the kinetic cost-exchange ratio has been shattered. A state no longer needs economic dominance to achieve battlefield supremacy. It needs a calculator. The data is irrefutable. A $5 million main battle tank, once the symbol of terrestrial power, is now a multi-million-dollar liability on a balance sheet. It can be neutralized, its asset value liquidated, by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a battle, it is an economic execution. The leverage is 10,000 to 1. Analysts refer to this vector as the democratization of violence. The term signifies a systemic decoupling of lethal capability from state-level GDP. It means a nation facing a solvency crisis, like Russia, or potential regime collapse, like Iran, is no longer constrained by the cost of a conventional arsenal. They are mathematically incentivized to bypass it. This is the operating system for the 21st century battle space. From a $500 drone to a hypersonic missile like the Oreshnik, a weapon designed to bypass multi-billion-dollar defense contracts, the logic is identical. Achieve a zero-sum outcome by exploiting economic asymmetry. It is the final protocol for a state that perceives it has nothing left to lose. The global conflict map is a deliberate misdirection. While legacy media focuses on declared kinetic zones, the actual staging grounds for systemic shock are being established in nations you are told are stable. According to CSIS analysis, these are the gray zones, secondary states like Canada or South Africa, flagged for rising internal instability. This is not a symptom of their own policy failure. It is the blueprint of a hostile, external protocol being deployed. A state facing a solvency crisis, like Iran on the brink of regime collapse, or Venezuela locked in a resource liability stalemate, does not simply fail. It exports its desperation as asymmetric leverage. The objective is to create a proxy laboratory far from its own borders. These gray zones provide the perfect testbed, Western legal systems to exploit, advanced infrastructure to target, and plausible deniability. It is a mathematical certainty. The deployment of Russia's Oreshnik hypersonic missile in Ukraine was not merely a tactical escalation. It was a capabilities demonstration for foreign clients. RUSI reports indicate that the transfer of such asymmetric weapons technology is the primary currency for establishing these gray zone footholds. A nation like Venezuela, barred from conventional oil markets, is incentivized to trade access for leverage, specifically the means to threaten U.S. assets without a direct kinetic launch. The Western response, such as the Missile Defense Agency's SHIELD contract awarded to Tetra Tech, is a predictable, linear defense against a non-linear threat. It prepares for a direct attack from a known state actor. The actual vector, however, is designed to be a systemic disruption originating from an allied nation, a financial collapse, a grid-down event, or a communications blackout triggered by proxy forces inside the gray zone. This isn't warfare, it's systemic liquidation. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a strategy of strength. It is a pre-programmed protocol for decapitation anxiety. The system is designed to automatically retaliate upon the detection of an inbound nuclear strike, compressing the decision timeline from days to minutes. The core assumption is that the data is infallible. This assumption is now a systemic liability. A targeted cyber attack can blind early warning radar, or, more destabilizing, inject false positives. This creates the fog of digital war, a scenario where a commander is presented with data showing a full-scale launch, but cannot verify its authenticity. For a state facing an economic or conventional solvency crisis, like Russia deploying hypersonic assets such as Oreshnik, or Iran facing potential regime collapse, this is the ultimate asymmetric leverage. They don't need to defeat missile defense systems, like those serviced under contracts by firms such as Tetra Tech. They only need to make their operators doubt their own screens. The commander is now trapped in a zero-sum equation. Option A: hesitate to verify the data. If the attack is real, you absorb a first strike and your retaliatory capacity is neutralized. Option B: follow the protocol and launch on warning. If the data was a spoof, you initiate a global kinetic exchange based on a phantom threat. Faced with national annihilation versus initiating a mutually destructive outcome, the protocol mathematically incentivizes option B. According to CSIS analysis, the fear of decapitation is a more powerful accelerant than the risk of a false positive. The trigger for the final protocol is no longer the missile itself, but the line of code that spoofs its existence. The next phase is not kinetic. It is a test of protocols. The Russian deployment of the Oreshnik hypersonic missile was not merely an attack, but a global notification. The barrier to entry for inflicting systemic damage has collapsed. For states facing a solvency crisis, such as Iran's potential regime collapse or Venezuela's resource liability, the mathematical incentive is to bypass conventional military contests. While defense agencies focus on high-altitude shield contracts, the true vector is asymmetric. The calibration forecast. Within 12 months, expect a sudden, catastrophic failure of a subsea data cable nexus, such as the Atlantic crossings. It will not be a missile. It will be attributed to a deep-sea seismic event or a freighter dragging anchor. The outage will sever a significant percentage of data liquidity between the New York and London financial exchanges for a critical 72-hour window. This is an attribution impossible event designed for a single objective: data collection. The actor will measure the West's response protocol. How long to diagnose the physical break? How quickly can financial markets route around the damage? What is the political threshold for deploying naval assets to a civilian incident? This is a launch-on-warning test for a zero-sum financial conflict. It is the cost-free blueprint for a liquidity kill.